Live thing. One more time. No request to join. Okay, I've invited you.
Boom, boom, shot.
There we go. There we go.
Don't succeed. That's how it is. First, you don't succeed. Gotta dust yourself off and try again. Ooh,
Absolutely.
a lot of patterns back there. Because
Hold
behind
on.
you is some, okay.
Let me try to.
I don't want to shout.
All right.
I'm always shouting. Let me try not to shout. Oh, we see. Oh, okay, there we go.
Okay.
Oh.
Can you hear
Okay.
me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yes, I can. Good
Can you see
morning.
your? Good morning. Can you see your? Because I can't see above your eyebrows. Is that okay with you?
No,
Well,
hold on. Let me
actually,
just.
I think I should be able to.
Uh,
But if you can't, then that was okay. Okay.
okay.
Okay. So how you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Having some technology challenges this
That's,
morning, but I'm happy that we got to log on. I'm happy that I got to join you.
yeah, we did it. We
Yes,
don't quit over
indeed.
here, huh? Plus, we Pisces. Pisces can't quit.
No, we can't quit. we got
Oh,
we got them two fish swimming in different directions, but we
right.
gonna figure it out.
We're gonna figure it out. um. Okay, so author, speaker, educator, and you have time to join us at 9 a.m. on a Monday morning. So thank you.
Yes,
Thank you for
ma'am.
carving this time out in your and father. So carving this time out in your busy schedule because you are also a father.
Yeah, when I'm describing myself, I typically put father first.
Okay.
It's probably the most important piece of my life. The most important aspect of my life, and just in terms of I'm family oriented. I love I love family, and I love being around my kids, and doing different things with them. And all four of my boys are playing basketball right now. So, I'm a basketball dad, big time. AAU
Oh,
basketball, skills and drills, kind of dominates my weekend. But I do find time, to write. I try to write a little bit every day. Sometimes it's a paragraph, sometimes it's a page, sometimes
mm.
it's 10 pages. But I try to write every day.
I'm glad you shared that you try to write every day because it's important for people to, to hear about how different artist strategies. So for you, it's writing every day. For somebody else, well, for me, it's not writing every day. Let's compare that. So for you, you say you try to write every day. I usually write something. I'll journal maybe, but I'm not working on a story. Are you working on a story every day?
No, and I kind of wanted to clear that up. So
Okay.
I journal as well.
Okay.
So sometimes it is directed, it's project focused, but sometimes I'm just not in the mood to do that.
Okay.
So, and when I say writing, you could write in your notepad on your phone. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? You could write on paper, notepad.
Mhm.
I'm constantly, I catch myself, I might be in the car or driving somewhere with the family, and I'm riding, of course I'm riding passenger. I'm riding shotgun when I write down, I'm trying to be safe. And I might have a thought or idea that, enters my mind that I wanted to go on a project. I wanted to go into a book or something, and I might just jot that down. So when I say I write every day, sometimes, like I mentioned, sometimes it might be a couple sentences. Sometimes it might be more extensive. When I'm in a zone. If I'm
Yeah.
in a zone, probably the most I've ever written in one sitting could be upward 25 pages.
Mhm.
Just in one day, just sitting down at the library or a cafe. But some days are not like that. You know what I
Mhm.
mean? There's peaks and valleys in terms of my creativity. But like I mentioned, you know, now that everybody has smartphones, you have a memo pad, a notepad on your phone. You know, I have countless entries in my notepad that I try to, you know, refer back to. You know what I mean? And oh, I could use this idea for this, or I could use this idea for that. And I've been writing poetry lately too, so I'm branching out. You know, I got inspired by you know, I twirl and smoke. So you know, I feel like
You're so sweet.
just to keep it a buck with you, Marcia, you know, some people have a lot of talent that's buried, you know, latent talent, to where they're focused on their 9 to 5. Like you mentioned, I'm an educator, I'm a counselor, teacher, etc. Sometimes we have some insecurities about our talents, right? Where we don't always feel comfortable, you know, expressing our talents and our thoughts and our ideas to the community or worldwide. So a lot of times it's buried, and I feel like I've lived most of my life, you know, not really embracing, you know, the fact that I am a creative. You know what I mean? And I just got to a point in my life, late 30s, I would say mid 30s, late 30s, where I was like, okay, no, I want to start putting this out in the world, because this is going to be my opportunity to kind of leave my legacy behind. So you can leave your legacy behind in a multitude of ways. You know, a lot of people are doing an amazing job of leaving their legacy behind through their teaching or being community activists or mentoring mentees. A lot of people are leaving their legacy behind through children, right? Or things that they created and you know, ideas and concepts that they instilled in their children that, you know, hopefully will go on for generations and generations. So for me, you know, I felt like I wanted to definitely be a positive force in the community, but I also wanted to instill, you know, instill things in my children and leave my writing behind when I pass away, so folks can kind of be like, all right, this is what Buddy Dude was about. This is what Rob was about. You know what I mean? Because I have conversations with my boys, and you know, the funniest conversations I have with my younger boys, and I'll be like, do y'all know what I do? You know, in terms of education, and you know, and they'll walk into a room and they'll be like, well, you know, most times you talk to people, right? Because they're speaking about my counseling. My counseling advice is like, oh, I hear you talking to people. I hear you talking to students, you know, but they couldn't really describe what I do. You know what I mean? And I tell them, like, all right, if anybody ever asks you, your dad is an academic counselor that helps students make that transition from a community college, a JUCO, to a 4-year college. You know, I try to make it simple. But the other aspect is your father is a creative. You could just say that he's a writer, he's a creative.
I want to acknowledge Lady Crawley? Been giving us a lot of love.
Oh yeah, that's my sister. That's Lakeisha. That's my
okay.
That's my
Thank you for being on here and giving us the love.
Hey Lakeisha, I've known Lakeisha since I was a teenager.
Oh, that's special.
I grew up with Joe Black and Joe Black and Lakeisha were cousins, so Lakeisha kind of became my play cousin.
That's right.
Sister, you know, over you know, my lifespan, because I don't have a whole lot of cousins and brothers. I don't have any brothers and sisters. My family is on the East Coast. Okay. So, you know, we came out of here by way of Washington, D.C. My mother's from Lakeland, Florida. So people that I've met over time, they kind of became, you know, my surrogate cousins, you know what I mean? And, you know, I keep trying to build and grow my community, you know, at the same time, keeping my circle small.
Yep. And when you said, so I want to touch on a few things that you went through. For one, it sounds like you keep writing on the mind. So when you were like, I write every day, and then you started to clarify what that meant for you, essentially it's even, I would say, like I tell people, even if I'm not writing, because I'm always thinking about stories, in my mind, I'm always writing. So I say that I am always writing, right? So you include journaling and think the thought process about writing. Because before we write it down, it begins as a thought in our mind anyway. So as long as we're thinking about writing and keeping it near to our heart, then it's always near, right? That's what they say. That which is far but is near, but is always on your mind or in your heart, is actually near. And that which is near, but which is far from your heart and your mind, is actually far. So yeah, it sounds like you keep it near at all times. And I love how you shared the different, that you're not afraid to use whatever's available to you at the moment to get your ideas down, or what, or yeah, because a lot of people think that that's their reason for not starting. They think that they have an aversion to a pen and paper, or that they don't have a space to write, or they don't have it's not set up kind of thing. And you're saying exactly what I say when I coach my clients, and I'm sure probably a lot of writers or writing teachers would say, which is just start wherever you are on whatever you have.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And then I also want to point out, when you said that you call yourself a father first, you usually acknowledge that as your first priority and talent and gift, is that you're a father. And then you proceeded to tell us about how you are very involved with their athletics, the boys. And so it's important to note that you're not just a father, you're an involved father, which then means that there's more time, I guess, more activities competing for your time, if you want to call it competing, because obviously that's not how you see it. But, there's more activities to fill up your time when you're an involved father. So now that becomes even more intriguing, as an involved father, how you make time for your writing. And you just kind of shared that with us. So you said in the car you'll be writing. Is there anything else you want to add to how you actually balance out the time to write and parenting? Because for me, I have a hard time shifting gears. So let's say if I did have a 9 to 5, working 9 to 5 and then being like, okay, I'm gonna come home and I'm gonna write for an hour and then I'm gonna do X, Y, and Z. That is hard for me to be regimented like that, because it's hard for me to shift gears too, to go from the 9 to 5 mind to, okay, because writing is although it can be strenuous, it's also, for me, it's therapeutic, right? And it taps into that creative side where you just want to flow. And when I want to flow, I don't want to be like, oh, I got to shift it off again in 60 minutes. I got to shift it off again in 15 minutes, I want to be able to just go. So for that reason, I don't sit down and write until I actually feel like I have a huge chunk of time to do it.
No, I can give some long-winded answers, but I think the Cliff Notes version of how I manage time, I put the important things first. So as I talked about in the beginning, where fatherhood is, family is crucial to me. So I do all of my family oriented obligations first. All of that's important, whether it's going to a family dinner or planning a birthday, being at the boys' games. And sometimes I might jot down things within my phone during halftime of the game. You know what I mean? Because I'm not always coaching, so to speak. The boys have their own coach. I don't want to make it seem like I'm this jack of all trades, but I do tell them things they need to do in terms of working on their jumper, working on their left hand. One of my boys is left-handed, so I want him to work on his right hand a little bit more. But finding time to write will typically come in the morning, right? When they're asleep. I'm a morning person. So, as I'm getting older, I'm mid-40s, I tend to go to bed around 10:30-ish, 11 o'clock. Some nights I stay up a little bit later, but that tends to be my routine. And then I wake up around 5:30 a.m., 6 a.m., and I write for an hour or an hour and a half, and then I'll wake the boys up and start getting them ready for school. So typically my best time to write is in the AM. So, you know, as a counselor, as an academic counselor, a teacher of life skills, and, you know, for 6 or 7 years, I taught a class called Life Skills for Higher Ed. And, you know, time management, when I ask my students, I typically ask a question at the beginning of the semester: what do you guys want to learn about? And 80% of my students, they want to learn about time management. Right. So, you know, I have, you know, a lot of lesson plans that are centered around that. And in many of the lesson plans, they always tell you, get your important things in first. So if you're imagining a cylinder that you're trying to fill up, and this is in Steve Covey's book, 7 Habits of a Highly Effective Student, 7 Habits of a Highly Effective Adult. If you're imagining a vase or a cylinder that you're trying to fill up, Stephen Covey would tell you to put the rocks in. If you have rocks and sand, you're going to put the larger items in first, those being the rocks. And then he would ask the classroom, do you have any more room? And a lot of the class would say, no, you don't have any more room. But then he has a pot of sand. So you pour the sand into that cylinder, right? And then he'll ask the class, do you have any more room to fit in this cylinder, right? And then the class invariably will say, no, you don't have any more room. And then he has a jar of water and he pours that into the cylinder, right? But his whole point in that scenario, that depiction is, you always have time. It's just how you use your time and try to work in those important things first. You know, that's ideal. So in writing, you know, my memoir, you know, Can't Let Nobody Ride My Bike. This kind of just, it came, you know, very easily to me because, you know, it was based on my life story, you know, being an academic in East Oakland, right? Where, you know, W.E.B. Du Bois, he talks about this double consciousness that a lot of African-American men and women deal with, right? There's no one way of being Black. We're not a monolith. So sometimes we have to act a certain way in corporate world. Sometimes we act a certain way among family, friends, in our community. Sometimes we act a different way in the hood. So I came from 2 educated parents, both of them having college degrees. We had a library in our house. We had the Encyclopedia Britannica, right? But you know what I mean? And that was more than most of my friends had. So it got to the point where some of my friends were some of my childhood friends on 78th and Hillside. You feel me? They would come into my house to do their homework assignments or research projects, you know, that involved them looking up stuff, right? But then when I spent time in the neighborhood, it became a point of, you know, contention that I was academic. So, you know, in my neighborhood growing up in the 80s, you got picked on if you try hard in school. You know what I mean? A lot of people don't want to admit that, but if you were walking around carrying books and using big words, you know, you became a target. You feel me? So I straddled that line in terms of, you know, wanting to do what my parents asked. You know, my parents had one rule, you know, I guess 2 rules: do your chores and do well in academics. You know what I mean? But the hood was telling me something else, right? So that's where my book idea came from. My memoir was about, you know, entering in writing contests. You remember Festival at the Lake? They had a big writing contest.
Yeah.
Miss Festival at the Lake. You know, they tried to bring back certain aspects of Festival at the Lake by having, you know, different shows and vendors out there a couple summers ago before COVID, you know, really hit hard. You know what I mean? But I took second place in a writing contest that, you know, my mom was like, you know, enter in that story that Miss Bovier got you to write. And I took second place in this contest at I was 6th grade. And then I remember being almost ashamed of telling my neighborhood friends that I had won this writing contest. You know what I mean? Because I didn't want them thinking that, you know, I was a quote unquote Poindexter, right? You know what I mean? So I talked about that in the book. I talked about how I was at a birthday party and I was using, I think I said, oh, that birthday cake is humongous. And then I remember overhearing some of the parents saying that, little Rob talked white. He talked like white people.
The parents were saying that?
The parents were saying that.
Oh.
Some of the aunties of, the birthday boy, my friend.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was like, dang, like, you can't use King's English, or you can't use big words or be academic without you being compared to a white person, right? Mm-hmm. But African Americans, we're very intelligent, and being smart is not synonymous with being white. You know what I mean? So it is something that memoir writing, that this particular book came easy because I had all of these experiences to draw from, and then I took it a step further. Being a hip hop lover, is I used a verse at the beginning of every chapter to kind of foreshadow what that chapter was going to be about, and I loosely got it from my mom, because I'll be sitting in the car with my mother. And we'll be talking, just having a regular conversation, and she'll say something like, "What time does the game come on?" And I'll be like, "I don't know, my Sunday, Monday," and then she'll turn that into a song. She turns everything into a song. So she'll be like, "What time the game come on?" I'll be like, "I don't know, Sunday or Monday," and so she'll be like, "Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, love." Shout out to Alexander O'Neal and Sherelle. So I wanted to foreshadow each chapter with a hip hop verse, and I kind of loosely got that idea from my mom, who was a librarian, Carolyn Alexander. Love you, Mama, if you're watching. And because I wanted my book to be just completely different from any memoir I'd ever seen, and I never seen a book written like that. So and I'm a big fan of West Coast hip hop, from Too Short, you know what I mean, to the Loonies, to Bad Influence, SoCal hip hop, in terms of Ice Cube and the Dog Pound, Dr. Dre, down south, Outkast and the Dungeon Family, all the way to the East Coast with Nas, Wu-Tang, Biggie. But many of the hip hop verses that I chose to use because of my bias living on the West Coast were Bay Area hip hop. So E40, Too Short, Ascari X, Digital Underground. They dominated my book quotes, because my idea was we're always citing academic research, right? So I'm like, rappers always tell stories. They tell stories in their, rappers are writers. Writers aren't necessarily rappers, but rappers are writers. So how come we don't give credit to, some of the storytelling that rappers do? If you think of Slick Rick children's story. So this was kind of my way of, paying homage to rappers, at the same time telling my story about how I dealt with bullying, how I dealt with the entrapments of the drug game, the entrapments of pimping and prostitution, and everything that goes on in East Oakland. So you got to remember, being born in the late 70s and being a child of the 80s, it was the end of the heroin epidemic, but the beginning of the crack epidemic. Right? The crack era, right? Which should never be glorified. This decimated many communities. But a lot of us Black and brown that came out of that, there's resiliency, there's strength in that, right? I'm thinking of Tupac, the rose that grew from concrete. Okay, now you might have some damaged petals, you might have some damaged stem, but that's still a beautiful rose that came out of an unnurturing environment.
Yeah. Tell us about. Okay, so that book, Can't Let Nobody Ride My Bike, is a memoir. And then you have this cute book, She Hit Me First. what inspired this book?
Okay, y'all need to cop that. This is available on Amazon, but Amazon make a lot of money, y'all. They are a conglomerate. They make millions upon billions of dollars. Go to hood2highereducation.com. Hood number 2 highereducation.com and put in a request to cop that. I'm in graduate school as well. I should be finishing my doctorate. I did a lot of reading on the criminalization of Black boys and Black girls. And Black girls, in terms of entering into the penal system, punitive measures have been taken on young Black girls. So, typically what happens in terms of Black girls dealing with oppression, and that oppression could be sexual abuse, sexual assault, victimization, bullying. Young Black girls have started to be targeted in public schools based on the zero tolerance policies that a lot of schools have adopted. Metal detectors, hyper surveillance, right? Where a lot of young girls, for talking back to a teacher, fighting, or simply being caught with a cigarette or a bag of weed, or being suspended. Once you're suspended, that goes on your record. Typically once that goes on your record, it makes it harder for, a lot of colleges, to accept you. So where Black girls were in terms of dealing with a lot of the systemic oppression that they deal with, they a lot of schools view, their combativeness as criminal. So young Jamila, the main character, the protagonist, and she hit me first, was dealing with all of that oppression that's surrounding her, but how her mother dealt with some of the things that she went through in school in terms of her getting in trouble was to hit young Jamila. And I came from a household where I got spanked. All my friends got spanked. And some folks, it almost became like a competition in my neighborhood, of who was whooping their kids the hardest, the worst. So like I would come outside my house and I'd be like, man, my dad made me go in the backyard and get a switch off the tree, and he whooped me till I had whelps on my back and my leg. And then, one of my friends would chime in and be like, man, that ain't nothing, man. I got whipped with a Hot Wheel track. Yeah. And then one of my friends would be like, man, so, that ain't nothing, man. My mama tried to throw a cast iron skillet at me, So it was always like us
competition of trauma,
trying to one up one another based on how we were punished. So
right.
Jamila, the main character, she took out this violence that she was experiencing from her mother, who was dealing with her own set of issues. She took that out on her class peers. So if a girl ran up on her, she would give that girl the business until she met a young girl in her class and a teacher that taught her that there was Maya Angelou that worked out her issues through poetry and writing. She learned about Mother Teresa. She learned about Oprah and a lot of these powerful figures, women of color that were able to be creative, and all of them had an aspect of nonviolence. So this story will definitely is relatable to everybody. But if you were raised in a Catholic school setting, I feel like there's still nuggets that you could get from this book. But my books have to do with the urban reader. Folks that have experienced what it means, what it feels like to grow up in the hood. You know what I mean? So it's very relatable.
It is. And I don't even think you have to come from that experience to be able to relate to it or understand it. A good book is a good book. So, you wrote a good book. It doesn't, anybody's going to find interest in it. If you're interested in young adult literature, if you're interested in reading about a story where a girl it's about a girl, she's the central character, protagonist. If you want to learn about You know, it can be like growing up in certain hoods. If you know, all that is there. It's an interesting book, so I don't think it's limited to people who've had the experience to be the audience. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. You know, I'm definitely trying to grow my brand. You know,
Mm-hmm.
where I mentioned in the beginning, like, you know, the writing came easy to me. You know, I've always written, and you know, I'm at a point in my life where I want to get my work out there, and I want to make connections just across the world. You know what I mean? So now what I'm working on, and you know, shout out Rolanda. I see my sis Rolanda is on here. I have been, shout out Laura. We were co-managers at McClymonds Swimming Pool back in the day. Shout out. Thank y'all for joining. I think how I'm trying to evolve as a writer is now I'm reaching out to agents. You and I, you sent me videos on how to promote books, how to make commercials, and I think that should be the natural evolution of me, because oftentimes, you know, folks that are creative, you know, we don't have that good balance of the hustle and how to get our work out there. So that's, you know, that is what I'm going to be focused on, you know, in the upcoming years. Now that I know that I can write a book that is liked, or you know, folks are telling me that this was needed or whatever. Now I want to just try to spread it to the masses. And I'm in the Hood to Higher Education studio right now, you know, which also doubles as my kitchen. So at any time, kids could be walking through the studio. You know, I might be telling my boys to clean up after themselves. You know, this is the Hood to Higher Education studio, you know, in the backdrop. And what I wanted to do in creating my brand, Hood to Higher Ed, is based on an idea, a concept that spawned out of a very popular video that was called Hood to Hood. And, you know, Hood to Hood, it promoted gang violence and drug deals gone bad, and turf fights, turf wars, dice games, and things like that. So, you know, liquor stores, you know, being vandalized, graffiti, stuff like that. So I wanted to put a positive spin on what is coming out of urban areas, you know, because, you know, if we think about creatives like you, Maricia, creatives like, you know, myself, you know, coming from 700, right? 700, 78 the Hillside. We have so much rich talent that comes from urban areas. And I'm not just talking about athletes that go pro, but, you know, folks that were writers, folks that like John Singleton, Spike Lee, that, you know, that ended up, Ava DuVernay, that ended up, you know, becoming these powerhouses, you know, came from a rough neighborhood. So Hood to Higher Education just means I'm trying to bridge the gap between what's happening in urban areas and many of the folks that that don't see themselves in higher ed, right? Because that's been my life for the last 16 years, is teaching at a community college. Because I remember the first time I was lucky enough to be a part of a program called Upward Bound. Shout out Upward Bound. Shout out MESA. MESA stood for Math, Engineering, Science, and Achievement. Before we was calling it STEM, it was MESA.
Yeah.
Right. And MESA was for young academics of color. Right. But Upward Bound, one of our summers was spent at UC Berkeley. So the most beautiful thing in the world, what I saw as a young teenagers, was seeing Black and brown on UC Berkeley campus, walking around, studying, walking around with backpacks, walking around getting lunch, going from workshop to workshop. And I think what it did for a lot of us in my Upward Bound cohort was, now that we visualized ourselves at a 4-year college, where it was like, okay, you might go to UC Davis, you might go to UC Berkeley, you know, Cal State East Bay at any given time, and you may not, St. Mary's, you may not run into another Black person all day. Right. You know what I mean? But us taking classes at a UC Berkeley, right? Us taking classes at Mills College, that started to destigmatize and those notions that we didn't belong there.
Right.
Because that imposter syndrome, that's real. That is
Mm-hmm.
real. So, hood to higher education came from that, because growing up in East Oakland, East Side Oakland, a lot of my friends was like, college? Ain't nobody in the hood going to college.
Mm-hmm.
Ain't nobody in the hood becoming, computer engineers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Ain't nobody becoming lawyers, that type of thing. So I wanted to tear those walls down by creating this brand, hood to higher ed.
Do you
So
offer services through it?
I do. I'm trying to build on it right now. Right now, I am an army of one, but I'm looking to hire tutors.
Okay, so it'll be a different. Okay.
Specifically in STEM. So if you guys know anybody watching it, if you know anybody that's willing to make a good amount of change, tutoring on an hourly basis, DM me, okay? Because I'm looking specifically for STEM tutors and English tutors. And what my goal is to try to pair up somebody that is highly proficient in STEM and English with somebody that is in need of help. And I'm looking between the ages of I'm focused on high school. I'm
For
focused
the
on high school.
students that need help, or high school tutors? Which one?
I'm looking for tutors right now. I'm looking for tutors.
And you want them to be in high school?
High school, yeah.
Okay, high school age tutors. Okay.
The reason why my reason why, because if most community colleges, if not all, at this point, they have tutoring already embedded at community college. I know Laney, Merritt, any school in Peralta, they have tutoring offices. High school, I feel like there is a deficiency there. So I'm looking to match mentors with mentees, tutors with tutees that might need it.
Okay.
And right now, what I do is I do workshops. I do workshops at all schools, but many of my workshops have been centered around high school.
Oh, okay. Okay. Now,
I do creative writing workshops, career life planning workshops, the importance of higher education workshops, or what to expect going to college. That tends to be my bread and butter. But I have focused and adapted my workshops on the need of that particular high school.
okay.
Right now, I'm working on trauma-informed care as well.
Okay. I wanted to ask you, a little bit before we go, I wanted to get into character development, because this is fiction, right? Yeah.
Yes.
So, how do you begin? How do you decide, where this story begins and what this character is going to do along the way?
So everybody has their own writing process, right? Mine's, I feel like that I can't just start writing on the story unless I have an outline.
Okay.
So typically, that is my very first step. And so far, I've only published 2 books, but I am working on. I have a project that I've been working on for the last year, but it has kind of been on the back burner because I'm a graduate student. So I develop an outline. Okay, I first I come up with what I think will be like a dope title for a book,
Okay.
and then my outline will consist of each chapter and what I want that chapter to be about. In my first book, I did it a little bit different. I knew how I wanted the book to begin. I wanted it to begin with a sideshow, and I wanted to culminate with the protagonist, the main character, Ronald, helping one of his friends out, by showing them that there's a different avenue he could take in terms of going into the streets, becoming a hustler, a street hustler. For She Hit Me First, I know I want to start off with Jamila having issues at home and school. At home are issues centered around being whooped, being spanked by her mom all the time, and how she internalized that. And I knew I wanted the book to end with her kind of having a revelation based on the teachers that she met, the lessons that she learned with dealing with friends, dealing with teachers, the revelation would consist of her understanding that she doesn't have to handle every situation with her hands, right?
Mm.
So if you're any one of my childhood friends that might be watching right now, you might be thinking this is a major contradiction with who I was as a kid, because I fought a little bit. You know what I mean? You know, I definitely you know, did not want to feel like I was going to be victimized. So, you know, when it came to an altercation, I didn't necessarily handle myself the best way back then. You
Mm.
know, anger issues or you know, peer pressure or whatever. Not, you know, not.
It's okay that you have changed, that you have evolved. That's okay.
You know, I told one of my friends that I'm a counselor, and you know, he was just like, "What, you know?" Now, you know, I wasn't no, you know, I don't consider myself. I don't think I was a bully or anything like that. But I do remember a time where I was like, if somebody stepped to me, it's on. You know what I mean? I don't, you know what I mean? I don't care. Yeah, y'all know that my parents went to college and all that, but I ain't no sucker. You know what I mean? And I feel like a lot of kids, you know, they deal with that, you know, peer pressure or, you know, just not wanting to be victimized. And that was Jamila largely. You know, if somebody early on in this book, if somebody brought it to her, if it was going to be brought, she was going to deal with it. She had hands for you, right?
And so and
know,
I want to know. Okay, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So I want to know, like, I want to get into kind of the process from the beginning thought to then the outline to then a rough draft. Like, do you begin with, this is a good concept? I want to talk about a kid that's taking their anger out on another kid. And then you're like, let me outline this. Okay, this is the title and this is how it starts. Or let me outline this. This is how it ends. This is going to be the middle. I'll come up with the title last. Like, what is your process?
That's an excellent question. My concept is always first.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my concept, I'm weird. I'm weird. So I might have a different approach than anybody else. My concept typically comes first. I'm like, okay, this is a good idea.
Well,
you know,
what's the concept that came first for you with this book? Like, what did you think? What was that like?
Remember, I said in the beginning, I want to somehow address the criminalization of young Black girls.
Oh, okay, so that's how it came to you. It came to you like that.
That's how it came to me. And I went to King of States. Okay, I went to Montera, my seventh grade year, half of my 8th grade year. And then I went to King of States. Shout out King of States. And girls fought just as much as boys.
I know. Period. I remember.
Girls got hands. If you went to Frick, Elmhurst, Roosevelt, Calvin Simmons, I went to King of States. Bret Hart, I went to King of States, and girls had hands just like boys. My mother was a librarian at McClymonds for over 12 years, and I had since graduated from high school or whatever, and I went to McClymonds to have lunch with my mom. I'm a mama's boy. I was taking her lunch, and a girl and a boy were fighting in the hallway. And the girl was just whooping this boy. She was whooping his tail. She was whooping him up and down the hallway. And I couldn't find any of the adults. So I broke up the fight myself. I separated them. This was the white tee days. I had a white tee on. And I got blood on my shirts. I broke up the fight. School attendant came and took both of them to the office. And when I got to the library where my mom worked, she thought I had been in a fight because I had blood on my shirt. So the concept, Marcia, it came first. I wanted to talk about, you know, because my first book was about boys. That was about me. Growing up in East Oakland, I wanted to write a book about girls that addressed, you know, how do girls respond when they're faced with oppression, when they are faced with drama, when they are faced with bullying, when they are faced with household trauma or spankings. Oftentimes we think about, okay, I'm a spank my kid to reprimand them. No, we there's other ways, there's alternatives to that. And I ain't telling parents that, that are listening, you shouldn't spank your kids. You're gonna handle situations accordingly. You know what I mean? I had to unlearn a lot of that because my father used to learn to lay the goon hand down, and then that got passed down to me in terms of a parent.
Mm-hmm.
As I've evolved as a parent, I've learned that there are ways, in dealing with discipline issues with our children that doesn't always have to involve spanking, right?
So you wanted to address a lot of issues in this book.
I was ambitious.
Okay, and so yeah, and you did good. I don't mean it like I'm a professor. You did good. I mean, like, I enjoyed what I was. I haven't finished it, but I enjoyed so far what I've been reading. Okay. So I get through the reading those points that you are ambitious about relaying to us. So
well, thank you. And you got to finish that book, sis.
I know.
That's kind of, as we Black folk call it, that's a coming to Jesus moment, right? It's a coming, it's a coming to terms moment in that. And she hit me first. You know what I mean? That will kind of it wraps everything up. So to speak.
Okay, don't tell us.
Revelation. And I don't want to, I'll spoiler alert it.
Don't spoil it because I want to find out myself. Okay, so you had the idea of I want to address, criminalization of young Black girls.
Correct.
Also in the back of your mind is like, I want to touch on this subject and this subject and this subject. We'll see how it all comes together.
I was ambitious, so I had the concept in my mind, based on my experiences, at different schools, at different public schools in Oakland. Mm-hmm. Right. I had the concept first. Then I said, what would be a dope title? Then I had the title. I said, oh, kids always are like, when they get reprimanded, they be, he started it, she started it. Mm. She hit me first. He hit me first.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So that's where in my mind I'm like, what would the kids say if they got in trouble fighting? And I'm talking about specifically young Black girls. And what came to my mind is, a kid would be like, she hit me first. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Avoid trouble. So then the title, then I came with the outline, right? I knew how I wanted this story to begin, and I knew how I wanted it to end. So I wrote. Okay. So I'm strange. My thinking can be a little different than others. So I wrote the first chapter first. I wrote the last chapter, and then I filled it in with how I wanted it to the middle, how I wanted it to segue from beginning to the middle to the end. But I wrote the first chapter first, or I knew that I was going to have Jamila, which is the protagonist, dealing with issues at school and at home. Mm-hmm. Okay, her mama is teaching her hitting by reprimanding her with a spanking every time. So in her eye, and she also had cousins and neighborhood friends that's how they handle their business with their hands. I'm gonna lay hands on you. I'm gonna lay hands and feet on you. So she had to unpack that, and in unpacking that, she met teachers that saw that she had this need to learn, and saw that she wanted to actually become a better person. Mm-hmm. So in becoming a better person, she's
Miss what's her name? What's the teacher name? She has a funny name. I forgot her name. The teacher.
The teacher. It's Miss February.
Is it Miss February?
Yeah.
I'm gonna look in this book and find out. I think you got the wrong book. Okay, anyway, Miss Raspberry.
Miss Raspberry, I'm sorry.
I knew it was. I was like, ain't no Miss Raspberry.
So Miss Raspberry and Jamila, they come together and they say, look, you're dealing with some issues, but let me start showing you these historical figures that dealt with it in a different way.
Right.
Right. So once
talking about this book. Go ahead.
She hit me first. Y'all gotta cop that. It's a good read. It's for third graders. I would even, depending on the reading level, I would probably say second grade on up.
Well, okay. I don't know that I'd be able to read this in second grade. because it has chapters. Chapters usually start around 5th grade. Then they have at least the with this font. This I would say this is probably like 5th grade through on up, based on the student reading it. Now, in terms of the adult reading it to the kids. Uh-oh, did I lose you again? You frozen? Oh, okay.
My daughter, shout out Lauren Alexander.
Mm-hmm.
She illustrated the book.
Oh.
And we have the I have the illustrations in black and white because I wanted to make the book affordable, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, whenever you have color illustrations, that's gonna hike up the price of your book.
Yeah.
Lauren.
So beautiful.
Lauren Alexander, I love you, baby. Lauren is at Loyola. She's a college student majoring in film at Loyola.
I love how you incorporated your I'm glad that you incorporated the talents and skills of your children, you know, as much as possible in your work as well, because that's important. Now she's a published illustrator.
My daughter is a published illustrator. You know, my mother had forward thinking. I can't take credit for this. She got my daughter to take a drawing class at Laney College when my daughter was in high school. So when my daughter was a junior at INSTA, my mom said, "Hey, you can draw. You got hands. I want you to take this drawing class during the summer." Because we didn't want it to conflict with what she had going on, you know, at INSTA. INSTA's in Alameda. And we found out that my daughter can draw like nobody's business. So I said, Lauren, I'm going to pay you to illustrate each chapter. She's like, I do it. So I paid my daughter $500. You know.
Wow.
Yes. We had a verbal agreement. And
that's beautiful.
I didn't want her to.
You gave her professional experience.
I tried to give her some, professional experience.
Yeah, and that's good. And that's beautiful. Yeah.
Lauren is a creative. She's a creative force, and she's coming soon.
Here. She's a creative force, and what happened? I'm sorry, I was here and all.
Well, she's gonna graduate from Loyola of New Orleans, and she be on the lookout for her. Lauren Alexander. She's gonna have some films coming out. She's gonna.
Okay.
She's gonna. So
she's a film. She's majoring in film, or what?
Yes, ma'am. She's majoring.
Oh my gosh! And you're a writer. Y'all might collaborate to create a film together.
I hope so. That's the goal.
Maybe she'll bring Daddy in, like Daddy brought her in.
Hey, she don't know it. She don't know it yet, but we're gonna collaborate on some film, on some cinema.
Yeah. Okay, so really quickly, so you shared with us your process for the way you write, which is very interesting because the fact that you come up with the title first, I think is fascinating. You know, a lot of times there are people I will say there are a lot of people who wait till the end to come up with their title, right? Or sometimes people have a working title just to be in place, but then they'll concentrate on plucking their title from the book, from the content of the book. And if they're not yet sure of where that is going to go, then obviously choosing the title will have to come later. But you it's interesting the way you approach the page. You have a title, and you have the beginning, and you have the end. And I think that is absolutely fascinating. I'm so glad that you shared that because that's one I've never heard before.
You never heard that? That some authors will write the end of the book, beginning and the end of the book, and then kind of work backwards.
I've heard of writing the ending and working backwards, but not writing the beginning and the ending and then filling in the middle. I've never heard that approach before.
Hey, that's been my process. That's been my process. I think for me, once I wrote the memoir and people responded to it or what have you, it gave me more confidence. You know how it is with anything, especially in school. once I got my associate's degree from Chabot, I was like, okay, I graduated from a school. I know I can get a bachelor's. Once I graduated with my bachelor's, I was like, okay, I know I can get a master's because I already
Right.
got
So when you did that
bachelor's.
first book, then you was like, oh, I could do another one.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And one's a memoir, so one's nonfiction and one's fiction.
Correct.
Wow. So you're expressing a lot of talent, because every writer doesn't necessarily feel comfortable writing in every genre. You know, it's like, you know, Sade, she sang her 7 notes and we love her for it. It's wonderful. She doesn't have to belt out like Aretha or, you know, rap or anything like that. We love her for what she does. So I try to tell people that often, because people think like, oh, if I'm a writer, then that means I write everything. But you don't have to write everything. You can write nonfiction, you can write fiction, you can write short stories. You can have just your little niche, or, you know, you might have a few genres that you play around in.
I'm not going to limit myself. I definitely think that a lot of folks are going to have much success kind of sticking to their niche, especially if they're popular. But that's just not how my mind works. You know, I'll be writing a children's book one day, and I'll be writing an adult book. You know, sometimes it's fiction, sometimes it's nonfiction. I have yet to break off into science fiction, but I'm not going to say that it's impossible. I'm not. Right. I'm a huge fan of Octavia Butler. Okay, Kindred, Wild Seed, you know, Parable of the Sower, Parable of the Talents. My mother was reading Octavia Butler way back when. And I would, you know, back then I would pick it up and be like, man, what's this crazy? But then as an adult, I fell in love with Kindred. That was my first Octavia Butler, where, you know, Octavia Butler envisions a world, when you talk about Afro-futurism, Black futurism, you know, it's putting the science fiction or scientific and meshing it with the African diaspora, right? And it's imagining a world, a future with us in it, not just surviving, but thriving. Some of her stuff has kind of been described as dystopian, where, you know, that's just a fancy word for a future where the world is struggling, you know, whether it's a plague or famine, you know, white supremacy, that kind of thing. But she did an amazing job of unpacking, you know, not only, you know, white supremacy and white privilege, but, you know, how Black folks are going to, you know, come out of all that. So I definitely, you know, want to be that kind of writer, you know, in terms of, you know, writing books that have to do with seeing Black folks, picturing Black folks in the future thriving, you know, doing the damn thing. You know what I mean? So like I said, I'm not going to limit myself to one genre. You know, right now, my biggest book is within this last year is my dissertation. And once I'm done with that, you know, I'll be able to focus on back on my creativity. I'm still jotting things down here and there, but, you know, I got some loose ends to tie up. So we talked about time management. You know what I mean? At the very beginning of our talk, Marcia. And time is one of those, you know, assets that we take for granted. You know, and I felt like once I published Can't Let Nobody Ride My Bike, I felt like I should be able to produce something at least every 2 years. That's my mindset, you know, because, you know, time is one of those things that, you know, everybody has a beginning time and everybody has an end time. Everybody has an expiration date. So I want to leave my legacy behind through my family, my children, and my writing. This is my opportunity to do that. And, you know, a friend of mine gave me a good analogy where, you know, in basketball, when you're trying to find a rhythm and you're taking, you know, you might sink a couple shots up close. And then you start building your confidence. Then you're able to take a step back further, and then you sink that shot. Then you're able to take a step back further and further, and then you sink that shot. right? And I kind of feel like that way in my writing. Once I publish that first book,
Right.
that's going to open it up to more. Now I can take a step back further. Now I could cross over into this genre. Now I can, expand and experiment.
Yeah.
I might write a book of poetry.
Right.
I'm inspired by Twirl and Smoke. Y'all got to cop that. And I did finish your book, Marcy. I finished your book.
Well, my book is a lot smaller than yours, though. I did finish your book.
I have a weird thing. Like, if I try to finish most books I start. Your book happened to be very good, so it was easy to finish. But some of the books that start off, not so good or whatever, I at least go to the end to see how it ends. Like, I have a hard time not completing but something that. Shout out to my wife, Cassie Alexander, just joined us. Shout out to my wife. I see you. My black is beautiful. I see you. I see you, baby. She's just coming from the gym. And my major support system right there. Her and the kids. I have a lot of fun writing. It's a passion of mine. It doesn't feel like a chore when I'm writing and tossing around ideas.
So I'm gonna finish your books. I just feel a need to tell you this. I'm having a hard time reading anything and even listening to Audible for too long. So what I'm working on is putting myself in a position. So my concentration is on something with my business, putting myself in a position where I can relax and catch up on my reading. So yours is definitely, I keep it close right here so I can remember to read it. So,
absolutely.
But I did get pretty far where the auntie came, and I think the Jamila, they liked the auntie, or they had an affinity towards the auntie, right? And then didn't the auntie have a conversation with the mama, or said she was going to have a conversation? I can't remember.
Yeah. So sometimes, we have our inside family, and then we have our outside family with our aunties, our uncles, our grandparents that might not be a part of the household, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to depict a chapter where the auntie gives a different perspective on her sister, who is Jamila's mom.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
And the auntie, was like basically told Jamila and her sister, look.
Now don't give it all away though. Go ahead.
Okay.
As you're talking, don't give it all away.
Okay, I'm sorry. But the auntie kind of put things in perspective for Jamila. And let her know like the background where her mom is coming from in terms of this is why she spanks. This is why she whips.
We're gonna do a part 2 after I read them, and then we're gonna have like a discussion of them.
Okay. Can I add one thing? Let me add one thing. I think if you are a writer, if you're a serious writer out there, I think reading and writing they go hand in hand. You know what I mean? It's peanut butter and jelly, right? Because you're gonna read some novels that inspire you, and not just reading anything, but read good books. Get recommendations from friends. It enhances your vocabulary. It enhances your plot development, character development. You have to, if you're a writer, you have to read almost as much as you write. And this is just my opinion. I think these two things, it's ham and eggs. They go together. They go together because it's going to spawn your creativity. I'm a big fan of Jason Reynolds out there. Jason Reynolds is doing his thing. He was the authority on youth on YA literature.
What's the book he wrote? What books did he write? Do you remember?
He wrote my favorite book from him is a Long Way Down.
Okay, I don't.
A Long Way
Down. He's not the author of Look Both Ways, is he? Is that?
Yes.
Okay.
He wrote the track series.
Okay.
on Patina and
Yeah.
her track crew,
Yeah.
which that's a
I
series.
was,
That's it. That series almost became like My Lion, Witch, in the Wardrobe because I made all my kids read that series.
okay.
Anyway,
Okay.
he's just
Yeah.
he's a dope author.
He is. Yeah.
I feel like I'm a dope author, and I feel like you're a dope author. I think iron sharpens iron. So
Mhm.
if you, and he's had more success than me, obviously. If you are an inspiring writer, you kind of you should have some type of status or plateau that you want to get to, and
Mhm.
how folks have gotten there. Maybe you need to look a little bit at the blueprint. It's the same thing Kobe Bryant did when he was studying Michael Jordan. You
Mhm.
know what I mean? And I hate that I'm using all these sports analogies.
That's where your heart is. It's okay.
That's where my heart is. But I feel like every mentor, every mentee has had a mentor. You know what I mean? Where Oprah took Tyler Perry under her wing. You know what I mean? Um, so I think it's important for you to ascribe to where you want to be. Right?
Mm.
I feel like that's huge. And I definitely feel like if I'm going to be successful in a YA, then Jason Reynolds is a good mark.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks for sharing your point of view about reading and writing and sharing your strategies and techniques for writing. And I can't wait to do a part 2 where we get to talk about your books in depth because I will have read all of them all the way through and can have some good juicy questions for you.
Thank you
Thank
for having
you.
me, sis. Thank you so
Yeah,
much for
thanks.
having me.
I
We'll be in touch
appreciate it. All right.
anytime. All right now.
Bye.
Bye.